Hello, everybody. I'm Russ.
And I'm Laura.
And welcome to Sunday Story Time. Today we're going to share with you guys some lessons that we have learned over the years from bike touring.
So pour yourselves a whiskey.
Or tea. This could
and
be tea.
Snuggle up next to a fireplace or a fake fireplace, depending on where you are.
And yeah, get ready for stories. But first off, before we jump in, what about that picture? Don't we look so young? When was this taken?
09?
09? Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. Oh, it was taken at the very start of our tour.
Yeah,
we were in California.
Yeah, I think that was, where were we? That was somewhere in the California coast.
Yeah.
And as you guys can see, we had all the things, and that's one of the things, and some more, and bonus things. So that's what we're going to talk about in today's story time. We're going to give you our 3 big lessons from bike travel, and hopefully, I'm hoping that you guys dig these fancy titles.
I dig them.
I'm
amazed.
We've got lower thirds, fancy titles, all sorts of goodness today.
He's rolling off the carpet because I get to join.
Yes. Only on special occasions. Cool. So we have some people coming in the chat. But first, I want to welcome you all to our first ever Storytime format. This is something we've been kicking around for a while.
Yes. So, I don't know. Should we stick with it?
We'll see. I think one of the reasons we wanted to do this is, we've done a lot of bike travel. We did a really big trip where we traveled for 3 years, and outside the blog, there wasn't a real format to share some of those experiences.
That's true. You weren't on YouTube in 09. What can I say?
Yeah. So we thought this would be a good way to dig into the archives, pull out some stories, some lessons that we learned from kind of long-term travel, and share it with you guys. But before we kick off, thanks again to our patrons on Patreon that help support the channel.
Yes.
Keeps us motivated to do content like this in these crazy times.
Y'all are awesome.
Yeah. So if you're in the YouTube chat, thank you so much. This one's for you. Cheers.
Cheers.
This is tea, by the way. It's totally not scotch. It's totally not a PD scotch. That's very yummy. Okay. So we're gonna jump in.
Should we?
Whoops. What?
I was gonna say, should we go back to that first photo?
Yeah. What about it?
And then you could point out that I'm on a dad bike.
Oh yeah, you can't really tell, but Laura is indeed on the dad bike here. What was the bike here?
It's a long haul trucker with a flat bar.
With a flat bar. Yeah, so way ahead of Specialized, guys. And just before, I know there's gonna be some keyboard warrior that's like, oh, you guys pack too much, crazy.
Yes.
This was before bike packing was a thing. There weren't resources out there, and kind of the dream was to do super long extended travel with all the things and four pannier packing. That was kind of the ideal at the time, right?
It really was. That was like how you knew you'd made it. If you were going so far for so long that you had to carry 4 panniers, a handlebar bag, and some sort of something strapped across the back of the rack.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I still remember. Do you remember that time on our very first tour? We were going down the Oregon coast, and we saw this older couple. They were probably in their 60s or 70s. They might have been on a tandem. I don't know, but they had all the things too. And we were chatting with them. We were super green, and they asked us, "Oh, what are you doing?" We're like, "Oh, we're gonna tour the Oregon coast for 2 weeks." And I asked them, when did they leave? And instead of naming a date or something, they said, we left in the spring and we're going to be gone until, I thought it was so cool to reference the seasons. That's just how big and epic their trip was.
That's true. But what I remember the most from that trip is that we were gone for 2 weeks and you packed 4 panniers because you were so eager to do the 4 pannier packing.
I know. It was life goals at the time. So, yeah. All right. I see some familiar faces in the chat. Brian Bechtold. I think he's the one that actually coined the term dad bike, which I like to now use.
Nice.
Rob Davidson, bunch of Patreon supporters. Auckland, New Zealand, reporting for duty. Awesome.
Sweet.
Nice to have you in the chat. Okay, so we're going to talk about 3 lessons that we've learned over the years of bike touring. And the first one is this. You pack your fears. I think another way to phrase this, or the way some people phrase this, is that you can replace your gear with knowledge, right? Sounds really easy, is very difficult in practice. I think especially as a new bike tourist, tourer, bike packer, or whatever, there's just a plethora of gear, lots of unknowns, and the kind of the knee-jerk instinct is just to bring all the things, right?
Yeah. Well, I think, especially when you sell everything you own and you take off and you're like, we're just going to be gone and we don't know what that means and, let's just take everything. And, or even if you're not going to, even if you don't sell everything, but if you're just taking off and you don't know where you're going and where you're going to wind up, then, why would you not take everything just in case?
Because, if you have a Surly long haul trucker, you can take everything.
And actually, the Surly does. A trucker kind of feels better with a lot of things on it.
It does. It totally sucks unloaded, but loaded, that's when you get the nice kind of suppleness to it. Okay. So we're going to jump into story time. And here's kind of a picture of how I pack. This was my bike. Mm-hmm. And I know, again, keyboard warriors, why are you carrying so much? We sold everything to travel. We didn't know when we were going to be done. And I actually had this very romantic notion that as we traveled, I would be able to book photo shoots and make money, and we could keep on traveling. So on the back here, you see that big Ortlieb duffel that was filled with a light softbox, a couple light stands, some wireless strobes. I think I had a reflector in there.
Probably a tripod in there too.
Yeah, for sure. So it's one of those things where, we didn't know how long we were going to be gone for. And, I just had this idea that I could still make money while we were traveling to continually fund the trip. And you carried a fair bit of stuff too.
I did. Well, at the time I was doing metal work. So I did literally have a bag of hammers. One of
my panniers was all the metal stuff. So hammers, files, nippers, sheets of silver.
Yeah.
Yeah, all the things.
Cool. So a couple comments about the audio, that there was a real bad echo. I think I figured it out. So if you let me know if you guys still hear the echo, I think I solved it. But again, no way for us to confirm because this is the internet. Okay, much better. Yay! Should we start over?
There's always something. That should be like a life lesson. Something always goes wrong.
This is the bonus lesson. If something can go wrong, no matter how much you prepared, it's probably going to go wrong.
Yep.
Okay. So
there's my bike.
There's your bike.
On its side.
Your bike looks very, very tired.
It's because it was hauling 150 pounds up mountains.
Yeah. So, again, back to the first lesson in which you pack your fears. It's the notion that when you're afraid of something and you go on a trip like this, you tend to overcompensate by carrying too much or having too many backups of something. I remember when we were on tour, we actually ran into someone along the Pacific coast who was so afraid of breaking his bike that he carried an extra derailleur. I think he had an extra shifter and a full set of park tools. But it just made his bike so heavy that it made it more likely to break.
I do, but we weren't doing a whole lot better.
That's true. Yeah, we're
loads on these bikes.
Yeah, I was standing there judging with 150 pounds of stuff on my bike. All right. So one thing I'd like to get across with this lesson, though, is sometimes the fears are unfounded, and you just tend to overcompensate because you don't know what to expect. But I think sometimes, the fears are actually rooted in some kind of experience. Mm-hmm. So we'll share a couple of those experiences with you guys. One of our very first tours was riding, where were we go? Was that part of the Oregon Coast tour?
Yeah, it was the end of the Oregon Coast tour. We rode inland from, was it Reedsport? Mm-hmm. I think, into Eugene. Somebody gave us a good cut through route, and it was stunning.
Yeah, it was
So problematic.
Yes. It was along this river called Smith River, and it was Smith River Road. And I remember names like Panther Creek or Panther Summit. And basically, you know, that was our first kind of fully loaded tour. Pretty much newbies at that point, overpacked. And one thing that I did not prepare for was the heat and the amount of climbing. You're going from the coast back into the valley, and in between, unfortunately, are some big ass mountains. So I think about 2/3 of the way up there, ran out of water. We didn't have a water filter, did we? I think we had tablets.
I don't remember what we had. I just remember that we had a map that somebody had given us, and it was a paper map, and it was the zoom level. It was zoomed so far out that you really couldn't tell which of the dotted lines we were on.
Yeah.
So we kind of had no way of like placing ourselves. Man, it was like that would have been 2007. So long before devices, and then we camped somewhere on the way across because it was a long enough ride, and I remember trying to throw food up over, like hang it in a tree. We had no idea what we were doing, but we had seen a bear. You saw a bear.
I did. We spooked a bear on the way up the hill.
We had no idea what we were doing. Free camping somewhere on this river. I remember fishing water out of the river, but
yeah,
we must have just had like iodine or something.
I think we had iodine tablets, and I didn't want to use it, which was kind of a mistake. We should have just used the iodine tablets, because the next day, you know, we had limited amount of water, super hot, middle of the summer, and I was just, I don't know, I was laying on the road at some point. I was in bad shape.
You were in bad shape. Well, part of the problem was I remember we got lost.
That's right. We had extra credit miles.
Like, what was it? Like 15 or 20 extra credit miles. It was ridiculous because we just, I feel like we were prudent and we got up early, but then we got lost and we got turned around. And yeah, at one point, like we ran out of water and it was 100 degrees, and I thought I was going to have to leave you on the side of the road and
just go for help.
go fetch help somewhere. Oh, it was not good.
Yeah, so by the time we rolled into the first small town, I don't think it was even a town, it was just like a little convenience store. I remember buying a gallon of orange juice and a gallon of water and just double fisting orange juice and water.
I think you drank that whole jug of orange juice in one go.
It was a bad time after that. But the point being that so traumatized me that like I'm super anal about carrying like water filtration. You know, even before we leave, like I'll check that the water filter works in the sink, because I have had it since then actually fail. Yes. And I had to borrow someone else's. So sometimes those fears which you pack are well founded, or they're grounded in experience.
You have learned. Well, at least it's a sign that you learned something, right?
That's true. Life is all about learning. Okay. Yeah, this was another trip where we were out going to the Carrizo Plain. We were riding with friends. Carrizo Plain, if you're not familiar with it, it's one of the most super remote places in California. I think it has the least amount of people living there. Lots of challenges through that terrain because it's hot, it's exposed, it's a long.
It's right on the San Andreas Fault.
Yeah.
So you literally can't drink any of the water there because it's poison.
Yeah.
It'll kill you. It's full of arsenic or something.
Yeah, I remember we stopped by a school, and we asked them, could we get some water, and could we get some water out of the drinking fountain? And they said, no, don't. because there was arsenic in just the groundwater, so they had to have fresh water trucked there, and we had to get water for this trip, which we then filled up in these giant containers. Mm-hmm. So, all right. So another instance.
Oh, man. Yes. So we ran out of food. Hey, that's fun. So yeah, when we were crossing far west Texas, there was this stretch where I think it was supposed to be like 3 days, like 3 50-mile days, long, hard days. So we bought and packed enough food for I don't know, 4 days or something. And then it ended up being 5 because we had like just gusting awful headwinds. It rained for like days straight. I think it was like 20, 30 mile hour sustained headwinds through there. And it was just like, I feel like we managed to do the 50 miles the first day, and then each day after that got slower and slower. And I remember pulling into, I remember the woman at the rest area in Langtree gave us leftover sandwich bread and salad that some picnickers by car had left behind. And she was like, "You look like you could use this." And I remember buying...
Did we buy all the Snickers out?
We bought Snickers out of a convenience store, and we were afraid they were going to kill us because everything was covered in like a half inch of dust. I remember pulling into State Park, and it was pouring rain, and everything was miserable. I think we got the last camp spot, which ended up being probably the worst because it was like out on a point in the wind, in the mud. But for whatever reason, the visitor center had microwave burritos. It was a freaking godsend. Yeah. But I also remember getting just enough cell service in our tent there that we were able to Google this place, which is the Comstock Motel, which was like 15 or 20 miles down the road. And so the next day we rode down there and stayed there. And I remember just getting warm.
It is brutal.
It is. Getting warm and, taking a shower, which was amazing, and watching the Oscars. But it was Sunday, and so, as a town of like 20 in West Texas on a Sunday night, everything was closed. So we literally dumped out the remnants of the food bag, which is this sad thing with the duct tape from the feral cat that ripped it open.
What do we have to eat here? You have to describe it.
Well, I think we put together pasta. I think we had pasta with olives, and we opened the emergency can of Vienna sausages.
Yep.
There's an orange there. I don't remember the orange. That's amazing. But I do remember that you walked over to the
I went to the desk.
Yes.
At one point because I smelled microwave popcorn. This is how bad it was, guys. We were so like famished. We had run out of food. Watching the Oscars, all these food commercials, just your stomach's like growling, and I smelled popcorn at the front desk. I very sheepishly asked the person working there if he had any more microwave popcorn that I could buy. And he said no, kind of sadly, and then I went back to my room. But then about 30 minutes later, there was a knock on the door, and he had brought us microwave popcorn.
He went home, didn't he, and brought us, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is amazing, yeah.
Yeah, he totally made that stay.
Mm-hmm.
I think the next day, too, he saw that we were pretty beat up, and he offered us a ride from Comstock to El Paso.
No. Del Rio. The next town.
That was the next big town. That's right.
I remember. Yeah, I remember gorging that morning. The restaurant opened for breakfast, and
yeah, we ate all the food.
So lesson learned there. We were joking this morning about what are those sort of everyday carries on. Even a short ride, and I have a first aid kit, and I have an armful of food. Even if we're only going to be gone for 10 miles or 20 miles, just there's always bars in my bag. So.
Yeah, I think another thing that traumatized us, which has somehow influenced what we carry on the bike today, is the cold. I mean, when we were touring. When we were doing that 3-year stint of touring, we toured through a full winter, and we were riding, through the southern part of the United States. We thought it would be nice and warm because it was the South, but little did we know that, like New Mexico, Arizona, most of it's over 4,000 feet.
Clueless.
Yeah, and we spent so much time in the tent because it got dark really early. We would try to get all our riding done as quickly as possible. Just so we could kind of get warm again. And for probably a good month and a half, this is what we woke up to every morning.
Yeah.
So very.
I think that we're still scarred from that.
Oh,
Honestly,
for sure.
I think that's why. So what did we do? We moved to Montana.
Right.
So it's winter here, and we're like,
doing it
wait a
wrong.
minute. But yeah, but I think that those experiences, they do impact the things that you carry. And so sometimes, I think the point, right, is that sometimes you overpack because you don't know what you're going to find, what you're going to experience, and so you bring everything. And sometimes you overpack because you've been out there and you've been through some gnarly stuff and you really don't want to do it again. So you pack that extra layer and the extra bag of food and extra water.
Oh, we got C. Johnson here from West Texas. We're in West Texas. We were just talking about Comstock and Big Bend and all the tales of woe and misery touring through West Texas in the cold.
In the headwinds.
Yeah, so that first lesson, you pack your fears. I wish I could bring it to like a sweet resolution where now we're wizened travelers and now we can pack ultralight. All we need is like a stick and a knife and we'll be good. But sometimes that's not the case. Sometimes you do have like an experience that really sticks with you and it's always in the back of your head and you prepare for that. Mm-hmm. That said, the flip side, as we have traveled more, we have learned to carry less. I think when we set out on that first tour, I had all the tools.
Well, I also remember that we knew that we were going to be riding through winter and we didn't know what that meant. So, I think I had 3 wool sweaters,
right.
So there are some things where you learn, a good puffy is going to see you through a lot more than a pile of wool sweaters, and it packs down smaller and lighter. So
yeah, I mean, prior to that, when we left, we were living in Long Beach, so super temperate climate. The coldest it would get would probably be the 40s. So we had no real concept of winter. Mm-hmm. But I think as we've traveled and done things and lived in the cold climate, we've narrowed down and refined our cold weather gear.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Cool. Are we ready for the next lesson?
We're ready for the next one.
Next profound lesson.
Alone together. Also known as social distancing.
Yeah.
The ultimate. So I think the thing that is interesting about traveling for a long time is that eventually you get to a point where you just run out of things to talk about, right? So if you think about it, if you and your partner, work in separate places every day, at the end of the day, you come home, you tell everything that you learned that day, what happened, all of the office gossip, whatever. When you're riding down the road together, there's not a whole lot. I mean, you're having a similar experience, seeing similar things. So you get to the end of the day, and it's not like you could be like, "Hey, how was your day, honey?" Because maybe he saw, a flock of wild turkeys that I didn't see, but that's not really a deep conversation there. And so this was really an interesting thing to come to a point where it was like, oh, there's nothing to talk about. And at first, like, I totally freaked out because I was like, oh my God, what does this say about us and our relationship? Are we gonna make it? All these kinds of things. But what's really amazing is, you get to that point where you run out of things to talk about, and then you become okay with not having things to talk about. And then you become okay with the silence, and then you become okay with taking the time that you need for whatever your alone things are. There's something that's really comfortable and comforting about getting to a place where you can share the same physical space with somebody and know that you don't have to keep up constant conversation. And that doesn't mean that you hate each other. And so, like, we got really good at, like, if you think about this happened to be a warm and sunny moment, but if, what Russ was talking about, riding through winter, when it gets dark at 4, and you're in your tent for 14, 15 hours a night, you end up sitting up and, for a long time. And if you don't have things to talk about, then, it's kind of, each to their own corner. And we got really good at that.
Yeah. And it was something I think we had done bike tours before, but those were always, the longest would be 2 weeks. Right. And this didn't really settle in until we'd probably been on the road for a couple months.
For sure.
I feel like, and yeah, I mean, it's just a strange relationship thing where, the typical day to day, you share your experience, but when you're seeing the same thing, it's okay not to talk about the same rock or tree.
Yeah, and I think it led us to some really interesting experiences. Like I remember pulling into. I was gonna look up the name of this town, and I totally don't remember it. Little town. I think it was the very top of Mississippi on the Natchez Trace, and a little speck of a place. We were riding through there. It was 100 degrees. It was sticky as all get out. We hadn't showered in days, and we pulled into town because somebody had told us there was a really amazing all-you-could-eat lunch buffet there.
It's the fried chicken. All you can eat fried chicken.
Yes. In the South, people. And then when we pulled into town, we were sort of looked at each other and we're like, I could really go for a motel tonight. Hint, hint. And we didn't even know if they had any, but I don't know, they must have had a visitor center or something. And I remember we paid at the hardware store and they gave us a key, and it was like down and around the corner, and it was an old converted like storefront. And it didn't really look like much inside, but man, it was air conditioned. It was dark, so we got out of the bright sunlight. And I just remember that, we checked in at like 1. It was like right after our all-you-can-eat lunch. And we just, like, each to their own corner. Russ was on one device over there, and I was on one device over here. And we didn't talk to each other for like 8 hours. And it was amazing. And in some ways, that sounds really weird and really sad. But I think you also, you need those moments where you can just completely unplug, even from the other person you're with.
Right. So this is what living the dream looks like, guys. This little corner in the closet had the best Wi-Fi, and I had to make some website updates.
I think this is the only surviving photo of you doing this, but man, this is a scenario that's played out at a lot of times since.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Cool.
So if you're social distancing, if you're quarantining with a partner right now, and you're used to working in two separate locations, and now you're smashed into a living room, know that it's not the end of the world if you run out of things to talk about. Yeah. It actually can be a good thing.
I think that Rolf Potts book, the one that I like so much, called Vagabonding, that's a great book if you guys haven't read it. It's all about long-term travel, and I think it's probably one of the few books that really accurately describes it. But there was a line in there, I think it was that book, where he said the first thing you give up when you go on a big long-term trip is privacy, especially if you're traveling with a couple. Even though you've been together for a while, it is nice to have that alone time, and for the sake of sanity,
you need it.
Yeah, to carve it out, because as you travel, it's easy to think that your lives have been frozen in amber and that you're in this self-encased bubble, but you're still changing as people.
Yeah. I think that's held even today. I feel like we're pretty good at being like, hey, I need to do my thing. I'll be like, I need some Laura time.
Yeah. So it might be asked, how did you travel with your laptop and keep it safe? So if you remember the photo, this was like a big ass laptop.
That thing weighed like 5 pounds.
It was like a small VCR.
Because this was over a decade ago.
Yeah. The laptops or mobile technology has gotten a lot smaller since then. The way I did it was I had a sweatshirt, and if I wasn't wearing it, I would envelop the laptop with the sweatshirt and keep it in the middle of the pannier. Clearly, you cannot do this if you've got a small frame bag or a butt bag or something. So one of the advantages of using a rack and pannier. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So David Boone here says, Bubble wrap, plastic bag, put the laptop in the right hand painter closest to the bike. Right?
Yep. Well, and I think like everywhere we traveled, that's one of the benefits of traveling two people is that there was always one of us that could watch the bike, so we would take turns going into places or that sort of thing.
Yeah, I do like this little subtle detail of putting on a right-sided painter, because when you lay your bike down, usually you lay it down on the non-derailleur side, which is the left side of the bike. So I did subconsciously or consciously put all the expensive electronics on the right side of the bike. Okay, so what do you guys think of these lessons so far? I know, really profound. If you guys have traveled long term, have you guys had similar experiences where you're traveling with a partner and at some point you just need your alone time? Or have you also had the experience of maybe overpacking too much on a big trip and then slowly mailing things back? I mean, one picture I didn't put in here was for the Pack Your Fears is we stayed with Jeff Boatman. And back in the day, this was 09, 08, he had a company called Carousel Design Works, which was one of the first bike packing bag companies, very small. And he rode us out of town with his bike packing setup. He was doing wheelies and jumping off berms and stuff, and we were huffing and puffing up the hill. And the night before, we had this whole conversation about, you pack your fears and all this stuff. So when we...
And I remember mocking him because he had cut his toothbrush in half, and we were like,
silly. It was one of those bike packers. But when we made it to the first town with a post office, we both rifled through all our bags, pulled out as much as we could bear to ship back, and put it in the box and mailed it back to one of our parents' place.
I think it was like 30 pounds of stuff too.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you're leaving out the part where after we peeled off from Jeff and we took the road that was going to take us to the campsite that night, and it went like straight up a wall,
right? As
if to like really hammer home that we were carrying too much stuff.
Yeah.
Good times.
Yeah, that's a pretty, I think, profound moment because we let go like of 30 pounds of gear, which when we first set off we thought was essential, but clearly was not essential because we could live without it for the rest of the trip.
Yeah, so. And definitely, I mean, over time we kept shedding things and sending things back so that 2 years later when we took off on the Bromptons, we were only carrying 50 pounds of stuff instead of like 100 pounds each. So much less.
Yeah, I think ironically, touring on the Bromptons was one of the things that helped us be lighter packers on the bike, just because the Bromptons had a very
concrete weight limit.
Yeah, there's no way you could do full on 4-paner packing on it. Mm-hmm. No way it could take 150 pounds. So, funny enough, making that switch to the Bromptons helped us be lighter packers.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So, third lesson is bike touring or endless travel is a different life and not necessarily a better life. So this was a lesson that took a while to really sink in. I think in society or in the media, this notion of endless travel and selling everything you own is really romanticized.
Yeah. Well, that's why Instagram exists.
That's true. I mean, everything that you watch, stories that you read, being the ability to sell everything and just go on this journey, this endless vacation seems to be the end goal.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. In and of itself, as if, I mean, you walk out your front door, and I think even, I believe that at the start. You walk out your front door, leave your keys behind, and everything is just sunshine and roses, and even if it's hard, it's still like amazing, to the nth degree.
Yeah, there's that saying, hunger is the best sauce in terms of food. I think travel has a similar effect on just your daily sensory experiences. Everything is super amazing, super terrible. You're just at this heightened state. So you have lots of big highs, lots of big lows. This was we'll talk about this picture really quickly.
This was probably the biggest low, or one of them.
Where was this? Was this outside of Yuma?
Yeah, so when we rode across, we rode from Yuma to Tucson. And so if you've ever been down there, we were basically on the shoulder of I-8 and the occasional frontage road. And it's like 100 miles, 100 and some change between Yuma and whatever was the next place of any consequence. And so the only way to get through was to just push into the bushes and free camp. And it's just, I mean, it's a whole lot of nothing out there. But you're kind of sandwiched in between the border and military, huge chunk of military land where they test ammunition.
Yeah, it was a Yuma Proving Grounds. Yeah. I remember looking at a map. I don't know if I had Google Maps at the time or just a paper map, but we had pushed off into this. It was just scrub brush. I think it looked like it had the foundation of a development that never came to be because of the big recession. So we were there, kind of free camping, and already kind of on edge just a little bit because everything seems a little bit sketchy on the way over there. And in the middle of the night, we kept hearing what sounded like someone firing a shotgun in the distance at like constant intervals. And the more we listened to it, it sounded like a really big gun. And it wasn't until like afterwards that we realized that it was probably live ordnance practice at the Yuma Proving Grounds.
That was a weird night.
That was fun, right?
Yeah. And then the next night made everything feel even weirder. Yeah.
Wasn't that the morning we got chased by wild dogs too?
We got chased by wild dogs. Yeah, it was like 20 degrees. I remember that because it took like an hour for me to be able to feel my fingers again. And then I remember pushing off here. Each night we were just trying to find some place that was reasonably close to the road, but but also far enough away that nobody would see us. And it's the desert, so there's not a whole lot of like big trees to hide behind, but try and find what we could. And I think we thought about camping behind this like old gas station, and then we were sketched out by it, so we went across the street and just like pushed way back into this like just open chunk of land with just
I remember there
cactus.
Being lots of cactus and mesquite bushes, and it was a wonder that we didn't get more flats throughout this stretch.
Yeah, it really was. Yeah, and I think we had cooked dinner and eaten dinner somewhere else, and then we just got there like right before it got dark, pushed into the bushes, pitched the tent, and tried to go to sleep.
Yeah.
And then, do you want to talk about what we got woken up to?
What we got woken up to?
Oh, you forget, man.
I'm blocking it out.
Yeah. So middle of the night, probably 2-3 in the morning, we get woken up to the sound of a car idling on the road, which. It's probably about half a block away, but, it just sounded really loud, and just sat there idling. And we were like, long enough that it woke us up, and then it just stayed there. And then another car came, and doors were opened and closed. And I don't even remember all that went on, but it was like, I remember being in the tent, being absolutely terrified. Because, of course, we were right there, not far off the border. Who the heck knows what could have been going on? And, finally they left, but we weren't entirely sure if they were actually gone. We didn't, you're just totally spooked, right? So there was no going back to sleep. I think we just, basically laid there in the dark until it got
light enough to leave.
Man, yeah. And then pushed over to the gas station and made coffee there.
Yeah.
That was creepy.
All right, so back to the point. What was the point again? Oh, it's
Lowe's.
Lowe's. So not always, sunshine and puppy dogs and endless gravel descents on, hero gravel. Sometimes some scary moments. Sometimes, challenging. But also, I'm going to move this from my face. Also lots of expectations when you leave on a trip like this. I had this notion that we actually carried a paella pan. That's why I'm showing this picture. It wasn't this big, but it was fairly big. That we would just have all these great open dining experiences, campfires, and food, and it would just be, amazing all the time.
We were gonna have a campfire every night, and just yeah. I think we did for the first week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's not always a reality. And what's there's this talk of, or the notion of a travel honeymoon, right? Where the first couple of weeks it's very exuberant, very heightened experience, always positive. But then after a while, kind of the shiny edges wear off, and it just feels like life. And that's one of the things that we came to, I'd say a couple months in, that we realized that this endless travel wasn't necessarily a better life. It was just a different one. And it also came with its costs. So this was, this is what are those memes, like what the internet thinks it is, and the reality. So what's going on here?
Oh man! So this was
this is like
Anza
Borrego,
yeah, California desert. So we were riding through, and we had to find a place to camp, and it's just all BLM land, and so you could kind of just camp anywhere, but it was like crazy windy, just gusting, blowing everywhere, and if you can't tell, this is like sand. So it was blowing sand everywhere. And we were trying to figure out, where are we going to pitch our tent? And we rode around for a long time debating, it was basically, should we, either we have to be brave enough to go up to some stranger and ask if we can pitch our tent in the, behind their car, or we're going to pitch our tent by the outhouse.
What did we do? I think we pitched by the outhouse, didn't we?
No, we pitched, the tent is like right here in the
okay,
picture.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I give this. I still remember this couple. They had this little tarp, pop-up trailer tent thing. Yeah, and they were super sweet. They were accountants. I remember because I remember her talking about how she works for 4 months out of the year, and they make enough to travel for the rest of the year. And I was like, oh, maybe I want to be an accountant. But yeah, so we pitched our tent in their wheel well, and then that was also the only place where we could get out of the wind to cook. And you can see that we made like a barrier with every pannier that we owned, and you can see the just like...
You can't do that with bikepacking bags.
grumpy expression on my face trying to like make food happen. But yeah, I think like, the difference, right, between this romantic idea that we were going to have paella every night and, open a bottle of wine or some ridiculousness, and versus like those nights where you roll into camp and you're fried and it's like, I don't want to spend any time. Let's just make some instant potatoes and, off we go.
Yeah. So this vision did not happen every night, unfortunately.
It did happen a few times.
It did happen a few times in the beginning.
Yep.
The romantic notion of campfire coffee every morning sometimes look like this. Especially
cold.
Yeah, especially in the middle of winter. And
I love this picture because it's just like, it just looks like you stumbled into somebody's basement and it just happens to be outside.
Yeah, this sums it up pretty well. So we're making breakfast. It's cold. We've got laundry that we're trying to dry. And this is what long-term travel is really like. Yes, you have highs and lows, but there's an amazing amount of kind of mundane and sometimes boring experience in between.
Yeah. I mean, we did get to joking about how it's just, it's the same chores every day. You still have to feed yourself and brush your teeth and wash your clothes, take a shower every so often kind of thing. It's just that, the setting is different. And there's definitely like trade-offs and stuff, but I don't know. It's still pretty nice. I mean,
Yeah, I don't regret doing it.
Our laundry doesn't get to hang in a beautiful location here.
Yeah. So that was one of our big takeaways is, life is life. Even, that life on the road, it has its ups and downs. One idea that came to mind is this notion of opportunity cost. You do this endless travel at the cost of doing something else, of learning a new skill, of starting a family, if that's your thing. It's you trade, one set of experiences for another. And for some people, it's right at that time. For some people, it's not. There's no guarantee that I think, you're necessarily going to love, endless travel. I think very few people are wired to go on indefinitely. When we first set off, we had no idea when we were going to stop. I thought, for sure we'll do a year, maybe try to go 3 years. We hit the 3-year mark, and by then I think we were both pretty emotionally and physically tired.
Yeah, I mean, I think we got to that point where we were done and we knew it.
Yeah.
Right. But
so,
that is very true.
David Bond. Sometimes I think bike touring is just linking coin-up laundromats.
That is very true.
And and I think this is often overlooked in the age of Instagram, where everything is just beautiful sunsets and campfires by the river. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of banality to it.
Well, and I think that the truth too is that if you're riding a really long distance and you're crossing the U.S., say, you're going to have some nights where you're camped in these really stunning places that just like they get you all the likes on Instagram. Right. And sometimes you're just like you're taking your tiny little patch of grass in the middle of a really sad RV park, and you're just glad to not be homeless. Or not, homeless by choice, I guess. But so it's I don't know. I don't know that there's really like, I don't know that I could say that there's like a better way. One way or another isn't necessarily better. It's just, something that I think we weren't expecting going into it. And it's like, it's good to know that, it's, it's not necessarily going to make everything better, because you still have to brush your teeth.
You have to brush your teeth. You have to do your
dishes.
laundry, find food, find a place to stay. Whatever, personal issues that you have going on in your head don't magically disappear just because you're on tour.
Yeah, that idea, right, of like wherever you go, there you are.
Yeah. There you are with your bike and all your other shit.
All your stuff. Yep. Yeah.
I think I still remember before we left, I had lunch with a colleague, and he gave me this talk, and he said, "You know what, Russ? In every person's life, or in life, there are two types of people. There are farmers and there are sailors. So sailors enjoy the prospect of new lands, of seeing the sunset in a different place, of constantly moving. And then there are farmers whose joy comes from reaping what they sow, being part of a community, and staying in one place. And neither is better. And sometimes you're a farmer, and sometimes you're a sailor. So this is definitely a part of our lives where we put on the sailor hat, and now we've put back on the farmer hat, I think.
Especially right now.
Yeah.
We have seedlings growing out there.
Right. Literally, Laura has food babies growing out the ground.
Yeah.
Yeah. However, I will say, I think if we did want to tour again, I probably would not take a bag with the boom mics and everything.
I should hope not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
Oh, man.
So, what do you guys think of our life lessons? Do you guys agree? Disagree? Do you have any other lessons that you'd like to live on that you've learned on your own? Let's see. We'll take some questions in the chat. So, Velo Studio, favorite food hacks?
Oh man, I don't know that I would say this is my favorite, but it's the first one that pops into my head. Zucchini.
I was not expecting that.
No, but Hear me out. Zucchini will last for like forever. They don't necessarily need to be refrigerated. They're a vegetable and they're a good starch and you can find them everywhere. So like when we were riding through parts of the country where you couldn't find a vegetable to save your life, or we were doing like we had to carry a week's worth of food, I could bring zucchini and they would last, and we could have them on day 6 and they still tasted good.
Nice. So if you're looking for a hearty vegetable, zucchini.
Yeah.
I thought like mine would be tortillas.
Yeah.
I think when we first started touring, doing ST4Os and everything, I had this romantic notion of carrying, freshly baked bread and some prosciutto and some nice cheeses.
Russ is the romantic.
But bread, my friends, does not pack down very well. It's only good for a couple days.
Yeah.
But tortillas, you can put peanut butter and jelly and have a breakfast tortilla. You can put ham and cheese, have a lunch tortilla. You can put, dinner foods and have a dinner tortilla.
You can put whatever's at the bottom of your food bag in a tortilla.
Right. It's basically
feels fancier.
It's basically ultralight bread. All right, let's see. Any other questions? So Aaron asks, how did you...
Oh.
Did we consume much media along the way?
That's a good question. I feel like I have a vague memory of watching a movie in a campground. I think like your brother must have given you some movies on a hard drive at some point.
I think we had some movies cached in iTunes at the time. Netflix wasn't a thing. Or Netflix was a thing, but it was only DVDs.
Right. I think mostly, I think we did then what we do now, and maybe that's why we love it so much now, is that every time we would land in a motel, we would just like gorge on crappy cable.
Yes.
That's how you discovered, what's the fishing one? The River Monsters.
Oh, yeah. Jeremy Wade. He's my hero.
Oh, man.
Yeah, so we did, we would stay in motels, we'd gorge on crappy TV. I remember a lot of Food Network. There was a time when we were traveling through Texas, and for some reason, I don't know if it was diners, drive-ins, and
I don't think that was a show then.
Wasn't that? It was something. But there was this whole series on like the best barbecue in Texas, and we literally changed our route so we could go to the towns with the best barbecue. I remember there was a town. What was the name? But there were 2 barbecue places, Smithy and Black's. They're across the street, and we tried both.
New Braunfels? No.
Was it New Braunfels?
No, it was
somewhere around there.
Like, there's a photo on the wall of the guy in the smoker.
Yeah.
In Smitty's. But yeah, I remember that. I remember eating a pound of meat. And being really glad that the campground was a mile down the road.
Yes. There's a food hack. If you're gonna gorge yourself on Texas barbecue, make sure the campground is not too far away.
Oh man.
It's a good question. Chris Kalberg, what were the longest breaks, 0 days, you took during your tour? How'd you answer that?
Well, we took a lot of, I think the way that we routed that trip around the U.S. was that we would aim towards, some sort of reasonably big city or destination place that we wanted to go to. And then we would stay there for, few days, a week. I remember we stayed in Austin for a month, Nashville for 3 weeks, which gave us a really cool opportunity to explore some places that we'd never been before and meet a lot of different people. And that was also a really nice way to, Lockhart.
Yeah.
And that was also a really nice way to, to get some time off the bike. And,
yeah, I think we traveled in kind of a different way that many people, I don't know, maybe some people travel like we did. But for us, it was always less about the route. Mm-hmm. Like, we weren't bike touring to tick off, the Trans Am or Great Divide or something. It was always destination based. Mm-hmm. Like, we wanted to see interesting places and meet interesting people. The route was secondary. We kind of did it on the fly. I think every morning or every couple days, we'd ask Facebook at the time because that was the main form of social media. We're here. What's something cool that we should bike to?
Yeah.
And leave it up to the Facebook. And that's how we chose. It wasn't taking off a route. It was exploring, trying to find interesting experiences.
Yeah. We should talk about that sometime.
Yeah. Maybe the
different
next
life
time.
lessons,
Yeah.
how we routed. Cause
So Lockhart, Texas was the place with the amazing barbecue.
yes.
And Sean, yes, it was worth it.
It was absolutely. Because I remember, I still remember that place, walking in to this building that was 100 plus years old and where they had been, smoking and grilling up meat for 100 plus years. And so it was just, the walls were dark with soot from the barbecue. And you walked in and I had no idea what I was doing. There wasn't a menu. You didn't get to choose all these different, compilations of food. It was just like, what cut do you want and how much? And it wasn't like, it was like by the weight. That's how we wound up with a pound of meat. Because I was like, a pound, I guess. And he just, he pulled it off the smoker and wrapped it in white paper, butcher paper.
You got white bread. And
that was it.
Were there sauces? I forget.
No.
Yeah.
This is Texas. Sauces for Bowden. Yeah, it was. I remember we sat down. We were like, wow.
It's some meats and some bread.
It was like paleo before paleo was a thing. It was just stuff meat in your face and have a beer on the side. It was pretty amazing.
So Brian asks, how old were you guys when you did this tour? So how old were we when we were this age?
Man, we were babies. We left like weeks after my 30th birthday.
Okay. So I mean we were young, but I don't think we weren't in our 20s.
Right.
It was definitely many years after college. I don't know. Maybe we look younger than we are. But yeah, we weren't exactly spring chickens, but we were fairly young. Let's see. So Dylan asked, what was the favorite state that we rode through?
That is a good question. What's your favorite state?
I still think Texas was one of our favorite states, just because it's so big and so diverse. You've got far west Texas with Big Bend, interesting towns like Marfa, Van Horn, Terlingua Ghost Town. You've got Austin, really cool city, Denton, Fort Worth. So in terms of interesting places, there's a ton, and there's also lots of great riding. Texas Hill Country, we managed to ride through Texas Hill Country right at spring when it was peak wildflowers.
That was amazing.
Yeah.
We landed in Lukenbach on the weekend of the hat festival.
Yeah.
Their annual hat festival. That was awesome. Yeah, gosh. I remember lots of great places. I remember the bathrooms in the Louisiana state parks were air conditioned, and I remember thinking that was amazing.
I remember the bathrooms in Yosemite had heaters.
Also amazing.
We had biked to Yosemite in November, and it was our first snowfall. I think it actually snowed while we were riding in or on our way out.
I think it was the morning that we were leaving. Yeah.
Yeah, so super cold.
Yeah.
And taking a shower it was a heated bathroom. It was super plush.
Yeah, that was amazing.
Cool. Well, I hope you guys are enjoying this. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. It really helps it in terms of analytics, so you can make those YouTube dollars.
Yay!
All 5 of them. We can pay for the electricity bill.
Nice.
If you guys have any other questions in the YouTube chat, let us know. We'll answer them. I'm going to go through here.
We should write them all down for the next one.
This one's a good one.
Yes. We rode on a lot of scary roads. There are a lot of roads that I think back on now and would never. I'm amazed that we didn't have more confrontations or issues. And there are definitely some places that we went that I would never do again. I remember, what the heck was that place called?
Do you remember that road up to Cloudcroft?
That's not the one I was thinking of, but
No.
that was yeah.
So we started at this tiny town. Was it New Mexico or?
Yeah, so we were in from Alamogordo, riding up.
It's like
is that
New
what you're
Hope
thinking?
to Cloudcroft. Or
No. Hope was on the other side.
okay, something to Cloudcroft.
The climb
Yeah.
that you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah. That was like I think it was a state highway.
Really windy, steep.
No shoulder, topped out at 9,000 feet. Yeah.
And there was a lot of traffic. And I
Yeah.
remember thinking at the time, wow, this is beautiful, but also very dumb.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, the one I was thinking about was somewhere in, I think it was Tennessee.
Okay.
And it was this
Was
the
it
gorge?
It was Nantahala.
Maybe, yeah. And it was this beautiful gorge, but I think we got there on like a Saturday. And it was, so there was just school buses with the rafters. So, the big, it was because of a huge rafting area and, narrow road, no shoulders, no space, windy, lot of traffic. And I remember pulling over like every 5 minutes because we just stacked cars up behind us. And yeah.
Yeah, that was
one that
that was the Nantahala River. I remember because that's when we met that couple.
That's right.
And then who followed the blog, and they're like, "Hey, we'll take you rafting." And we're like, "Yay, thank God! We don't have to ride this terrible road."
Yeah.
I remember there were lots of Walmart trucks that would pass us, like big heavy goods vehicles on this narrow river road.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was a hard one. Mr. Clay Photo, did you have a hard time adjusting to settled life when you finished the touring?
Let's answer it this way. It took us a year to buy a bed. Yes. Yeah, I think that there was, I think the hardest part was this idea that, we had literally sold or gotten rid of everything we owned before we did this trip. And so this idea of what if we don't like being settled? What if we want to do this again? And in the meantime, we collect a whole bunch of crap and then we have to get rid of it again. And so I think it took us a long time to come to terms with, no, actually, I think we're gonna hang out for a while. So that was hard.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we had identified so much with this identity of a traveler, whatever it means, that it was really hard to let go.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like we left when we landed in Portland and lived there for the first year. We were living there with 1 foot mentally out the door, thinking that that's just what we did. We didn't want to be tied down, man. We wanted to hit the road at any moment. Yep. And when we bought a bed, that was our first major piece of furniture. It just felt so final and settled.
Yep. And then shortly thereafter, we went to IKEA and bought a couch.
Right, and then it was over. Now we have all this crap all over again.
But that's okay.
Let's see. Pascal, what would you want to do month plus, full on touring again, and why or why not? I think we still want to travel by bike, but I think at this stage in our lives, the notion of endless travel probably not so much, but probably base camping in one destination and doing loop rides from there, or doing a smaller regional tour. I think what I enjoyed the most out of touring was meeting people, learning about a place, really sinking in. The riding was kind of secondary. I mean, it was definitely important. Like, we wanted a good riding experience, but ultimately it was the other life experiences. That was the purpose for doing it. And you just can't do that when you're moving every single day. I think we realized that fairly on the big tour. when we first started, we get up in the morning, ride, sleep, eat, repeat, and I think about 2 or 3 weeks in, it just dawned on us. It felt like a really long bike commute, if you were to do it that way. And we made the conscious decision to really slow down, to pick destinations and sink in for a while.
Yeah, for sure. I think I like the idea of doing, some self-supported touring again. But my big hang up is, I don't want to have those nights where there's nothing else, so we're going to stay at the RV park, because you're just trying to get through. And so, winding up, I think that ends up shortening your routes, because, in order to have a really nicely curated route with better camping options and those sorts of things, then it ends up being a shorter distance. So probably not a month plus.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Yeah.
Chris Lang asks, what was the most common argument you two had? I can tell you when they happened. It was usually from lack of food.
Yes. Or when you got really hot.
Yeah, or when I got really hot. That's why I have to wear the floopy flappy clothing.
Mm-hmm.
It's
true. I probably had to do with directions, which way we were going to go.
I think we also, one of the things when you're biking together is learning each other's pace.
Mm-hmm.
So, kind of naturally selecting who's going to lead, who's going to set the tempo. If someone falls behind, how much you should wait for them or not.
Mm-hmm.
Also, we developed kind of a very crude communication system with bells. Instead of screaming at the other person, you can potentially sound angry. We had bike bells on both our bikes, and we'd have like a one ding for hey,
many dings for pull the F over.
Right. Again, very crude system, but still, with the bike bell, it was loud enough and it was at a pitch enough that you could hear over the traffic.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Marcos asks, worse mechanical failure or fix?
All yours.
Yeah, I tended to break stuff pretty often. Probably the worst mechanical failure was I absolutely destroyed my rear wheel while on tour. We were just carrying so much stuff, and under the braking, forces, the rim brakes, I just wore through the rim wall, and it started to split while we were in a campsite.
It probably started to split a long time before,
That's
but
true.
Yeah. And I feel like you noticed it in that morning. I can't remember. I just remember when you discovered it and being like, "Oh crap!" Because we were at a campground.
I think we were leaving the camp. We were about to leave, and I was like, "Oh, we can't leave." And interestingly, it did resolve itself. However, we had just ridden, by Rivendell a couple days before, and got to chat with them. So I called them up from the campground, talked to Rich Lesnick, I believe is his last name. He's the guy that builds all the wheels for Riv, and explained the situation. I was like, "Look, we just met. We're in the campground, not too far from you guys, and my wheel is dead. Can you build another one?" And he did. He built it that afternoon, and they overnighted it to the campground. And fortunately, I had a freewheel removal tool and some way to get the cassette off, which is a pretty interesting hack I'll share on the channel later. But yeah, so good thing I carried the freewheel removal tool. And I was able to swap everything over to the new wheel. So that was probably the biggest mechanical failure.
Yeah.
So
that was, well, beyond the part on your Brompton that broke
Oh yeah.
that hosed our whole planned route, and
yeah, we were
how that all went down.
So after the long haul truckers, we toured on the Bromptons for a couple years. and we were doing a tour in New Zealand, and about 2/3 of the way through, the main hinge pin bolt on my Brompton like broke in half, or I don't know.
Yeah, it was basically the thing that holds the bike together.
Yeah, so without that, pretty much the bike is toast. So we had to reroute to Clever Monkey, I think is the bike shop.
Yeah.
They had to drill the sucker out overnight apart from England and repress it in there, and then we were on our way. But that was the other big mechanical failure.
Yeah.
So what was your favorite bike to tour on? I think we can include. Let's broaden it to include all present bikes.
Well, presently, my favorite's gonna be my breadwinner.
Yeah.
Although it hasn't really done more than just like an overnighter. I don't know. I mean, honestly, the Brompton was a pretty great travel bike because it folds so compact, and then the way that we packed it, it was so easy to just have backpack and then one thing in each hand, and so then we could hop on trains and buses and cut the distance. And so like being able to hop over bad sections, that was definitely a plus there.
Yeah, touring with the Brompton seems kind of unlikely, but it's like having a superpower.
Yeah.
Because you can hop on any bus or train or boat that doesn't necessarily have bike facilities. You can fold up the Brompton, backpack.
Yeah.
Unlike, we'll tell you why we started touring with the Brompton. It was during the big 3-year tour with the long haul trucker. At one point, we were in the East Coast, and trying to navigate the northeast with a fully loaded bike on the train is hell.
Bonkers. I remember trying to get, I think it was the light rail in Baltimore. We were trying to get on to use that to get out of town, and nobody could tell us. Nobody knew where to get on. And so somebody had said, just use the wheelchair ramp. And so we did that, but then the conductor wouldn't let us on that way.
Yep.
And it was one of those trains where there's like a lip between the platform and the train. And so we finally ended up figuring out how to get on the train, and then there wasn't a designated place to put bikes. So we were in the same place, but then the conductor yelled at us because we were supposed to be in different places. So then Russ had to walk all the way down the train, and then he got yelled at for being down there. So he had to walk all the way back because nobody knew. Because clear policies, man, they go a long way. But yeah, so just that hassle. And I remember trying to get on the train out of New York, and just a full-size bike with 4 panniers and a bunch of other crap. It just doesn't fit very well on the trains that we have here in the States.
Yeah.
Or buses.
So it was after that experience we're like, we still want to do this bike travel thing, but we want to use transit in some parts, and a full-size bike, just not going to do it.
Yeah.
And it came in super handy when we were in New Zealand. New Zealand had this amazing network of tourist buses.
Mm-hmm.
I think tourism after dairy is their second biggest industry. So big infrastructure, and we use the buses in coordination with the Bromptons to hopscotch, to skip the really crappy parts, get to interesting destination,
Mm-hmm.
and start touring from there.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think we could have done that with full-size bikes.
No, because most of those buses, they didn't have bike racks. They just had the luggage bays. And they were confused by what exactly we were rolling up with, and this like folded up bike kind of a thing. So they were just like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah. Cool. Bode and Bub, thank you.
Nice.
If you guys have any other questions about touring with the Brompton, since we're on the topic, let us know. Or questions in general about bike touring, bike travel, other bike hacks. Gus, thanks. Yes, we made an investment. we made an investment in both audio and visual. I figured if I'm going to subject the internet to these live streams, it should at least look good.
There you go.
And sound good.
Yes.
So.
Nice.
So David Boone, I've considered Bike Friday for the same reasons.
Yeah.
So funny enough, I used to own a Bike Friday. That was actually, I had a Bike Friday New World Tourist, and that could technically be my first ever custom bike, because it was like custom to me. And it's a great bike, you know, can use the components and gearing of full-size bikes. Ultimately, I sold it and went Brompton, primarily because the fold of the New World Tourist wasn't that great. It was kind of cattywampus and wires all over the place. And it was more the kind of bike that you would bring on a case and reassemble once, but not the kind that you could do a quick fold and put under a table or bring with you on the train. So I think it's more of a small bike than the true folding bike, if that makes sense.
Good travel bike.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sean Gould, what don't you miss about touring?
Man, well, I don't miss the those that the logistical puzzle of trying to figure out where are we going to stop today, and is there some place to sleep there, and if that sort of like trying to find something, in like the hierarchy, right, of where you want to stay on a bike tour, the good campgrounds, and then, the good motels, and then the cheap motels, and then the sad RV park. And, that puzzle and that sort of anxiety of like, what if there isn't anything? What if we wind up someplace and there's no good place to camp. There's no warm showers hosts. We can't find, a good Samaritan to take us in. And we wind up just like, pitching back behind a convenience store or something. Don't miss that.
Yeah, I think that's one thing we both realized when we first settled into Portland, is that there was all this background processing our brains were constantly doing. And we were living just basically a couple years of this low level stress.
Yeah.
From always negotiating about where we're going to stay, what we're going to eat, all this stuff. And I remember that first year when we were living in Portland in an actual apartment, it was such like a big relief lifted from our shoulders.
Yeah. I remember laughing when we would come into a town that we were planning on staying for a little while, and we'd usually try and line up somebody that we could stay with for a couple of days, and we'd roll in and they'd be so excited and they'd want to show us around, and you could go here and you could go there, and there's this great museum and this and that, and literally like the next day we'd just be like, I want to like do laundry and I want to hide from the sun.
Yeah.
And I don't want to think about anything. Yeah,
I remember when we were in Alamogordo and we were staying with that guy Mike, and he was we were staying with this guy who was following our trip, and he had suggested all these things to do, or we could go watch Avatar in 3D, and we're like, bam,
done. 4-hour movie, bring it on.
It felt like such a luxury to be out of the wind, out of the cold, climate controlled area, comfy seats. And
popcorn.
Yeah, with popcorn and Coke and Butterfingers. And it sounds so anti-romantic, right? That you should always want to be outside and stuff, but you can get too much of a good thing, I think.
That is true.
Yeah.
That's true. Oh man.
Let's see.
We're gonna have to write down all these questions for like the next one. Oh man.
So Andy asks, how did we meet?
Well, we were neighbors effectively.
Yeah.
When I moved to Long Beach, I moved in like a half a block up the road from you.
This is post college, not too many years after.
Right. I think it was like a year or two after I had graduated. Yeah, and neighborhood where everybody knew everybody. Real, older neighborhood, so narrow streets and a lot of just everybody knew everybody. And I think our neighbor had a party.
Yeah, it's probably So
Yeah.
it was pre-internet dating, believe it or not. I mean,
Yeah.
things were happening on the internet, but it was still very taboo. Not there weren't apps for it. Let's just
That
put
is
it that
true.
way.
That is
We
true.
met the old-fashioned way at a house party.
House party. My neighbors.
Right.
Yeah.
So Larry W, how do you secure your bike on the trout stream when fishing? Usually, typically, the places where we fish, there aren't a whole lot of people, and if there are, the last thing they want to steal is a bike. When I fish in
Yeah.
town, I do lock it up.
Yeah.
I'll just free lock it, carry an Abyss lock and lock the frame to the wheel.
Mhm. But I mean, like if it's a kind of river where there's a bank that's reasonable to push the bike down, we'll do that. Lay them down on the gravel.
Yeah. So Dave Jeffers asked if you could build your dream bike for gravel off-road touring with an unlimited budget. What frame would you start with, Laura?
I have to tee this one up to you, Russ, because I would just start with my breadwinner.
It depends. For me, it depends on the tour. If it were a gravel road tour, so not mountain biking, I'm pretty happy with my Bambora. I'd love to see it in Altai, and curious how that rides. A test bike that I've been smitten with is recently the Ritchie Outback. It's a bike that I didn't think I would like because of its kind of longish geometry, but the way it's executed and the frame material, it's more fun than the numbers would belie. So I'd consider the Ritchie Outback as a bike. Yeah. And I don't know, in terms of parts, like I'm not super fancy. I think for touring, I would definitely go with some kind of alloy wheel set rather than a carbon one. Yeah.
I mean, the reason that I built up my breadwinner with cable brakes was entirely so that we could do a lot of gravel touring on it, and I wouldn't have to worry about hydraulic issues. So those, I would think about all those kind of roadside maintenance concerns.
Yeah. All right. So what's tonight's bourbon flavor? Unfortunately, not bourbon. So what are you drinking there?
I'm drinking the Whistle Pig. What do they call it? Their farm style?
Farm stock.
Farmhouse? Farm stock.
Yeah.
Yeah, Whistle Pig farm stock rye.
And this was what was this? It was Highland Park Valknut expression. So Scotch. Very tasty.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So Sean Gould. All right. So you got a charged spoon on the way. Hope you like it.
Okay. Nice.
Yes, definitely blame Amazon. It's one of those saddles which, I think for the money, it's worth taking the risk. It's not super expensive, and kind of like a shape. It kind of depends on how you set up your handlebar to seat. I think it does fairly well even.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Now you
Yeah,
had the
I mean,
ladies version.
Yeah, I've had charge ladle on my bikes for years.
Yeah.
And I love it. So sweet.
Cool. So Edgar, have we ever have you tried to? No, we have not.
It is on the list.
Yeah.
We know we have several friends who have, and the stories are amazing. So
Yeah.
one day.
So Spencer asked, would your dream touring bike have an IGH? I know that there are people who are fans of, roll-offs and pinion drives, and I'm sure that they're awesome. But for me, I feel like they're a little bit of a black box. So very specialized to work on, hard to find parts. I'm already a pretty crappy mechanic, so to add more complication, I think would be bad news for me. So I've not been super into IGHs personally. I know people that have toured Mongolia, like far-flung places, that love roll-off and all that stuff. But for me, I'd probably just keep it fairly simple with just a derailleur and chain.
Mm-hmm.
So Keith Adler here, a fan of tie and roll-off. That would be an awesome bike.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Well, if you guys like this video, give it a thumbs up. It helps with the algorithms, you know, because science.
And also let us know if we should keep doing this. If this should be our new Sunday evening for a while.
Yeah, we've got lots of different topics, lots of different stories. What was the next one we were thinking about talking about?
The people you meet?
Yes.
Maybe? More lessons from the road?
Yeah.
How to not kill your partner?
Yeah, when we toured, we stayed with over how many people?
I can't remember. Well over 100, I'm sure. I actually kept notes. I still have those notebooks. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for us, like a big part of the touring is that experience of meeting people, and it was a cool way to make fast friends because you're traveling and there's kind of no strings attached, and because of that dynamic, people would let their guard down. You could just cut to the chase.
Yeah.
You know, there wasn't any of like the weird negotiations. You could just kind of talk. It was pretty cool. We got to stay with people that were very well off to people that were living in a house with dirt floors, that had very little, but still managed to meet eye to eye with them. So yeah.
So.
Cool. Well, thank you for joining us for our first ever Sunday story time. I'm trying to find the button to make this stop going live. I think it might be
the finish button.
It might be this one. Cool. Well, if you guys like this video, give it a thumbs up. You know, share it. If you have suggestions for future storytime videos, let us know in the comments, or storytime topics. Let us know in the comments below. And thanks again to the Patreon supporters. There are quite a few of you in the room. And yeah, we've got some great content coming up this week. I think the live stream for this week is with Outer Shell Adventure. So they're a small bag maker based in the Bay Area. Pretty innovative with their construction and how their bags attach to their bikes. So that's pretty exciting.
Cool.
And yeah, so till next time, guys.
Awesome. Thanks for joining.
Yeah.